sure it looks like it's picking it up fine. And yes, it should be fine. All right, so as long as nothing bad happens, you should be in the clear. The stream is already live. I guess you can just wait around for people to join. I think it's supposed to start at 11:37. So yeah.
Perfect.
Also, do you want to check on YouTube, make sure everything's good before I take off?
Yeah, I'm checking it. Seems to be working just fine.
All right, then I'll leave you to it.
Catch you later then. Fantastic now. Alright, everything's set up, so should have the stream working as intended. A little bit later than expected. It was supposed to be 30 minutes ago, but my scans were broken for some reason because the computer just does not do what it's supposed to do when I ask it to do what it's doing. It's just a failure. Yeah. Right now, I'm just going to be, for anyone who's there, I'm just going to be talking mostly about the scans that I have at my disposal for the previous protagonist swap that I did. However, it will probably only start when we get like a couple people here. Hang on one sec. Hello, Ezio. How you doing? We're just kind of waiting for other people to join so that we can have some more questions, everything float. Hello, Rock and Ellis. Seems you've arrived. And maybe like one more person, and then I'll be able to start talking. Just for context, did you guys actually watch the Protagonist swap video, or am I going to have to, like, you know, explain everything all over again? I hear things have been said. That's like the most vague way of... That is the most vague way of referring to like a conversation or something that someone said. Like, I heard something have said. Like, oh yeah, that typically does happen in conversation. People have been known to talk during conversation. I know, it's shocking, really. Seems we got 4 people here. So I'm asking if any of you have seen it because that's what we're going to be discussing. But since we've gathered enough people here, I guess I can start and go over some of the process for what I was talking about. So these are going to be the scans that I wanted to present for the video. These are the scans that I was referring to during the course of the video. So some of them, I think only a few of them for Warhammer were pulled from Google Images because I just needed like a visual, but most of them were taken directly from the novels or the codexes whenever I needed like a direct claim for something. So I believe This first one is supposed to be a visual example of a purity seal, because I was talking about what I was just sourcing a couple of the weapons that Titus in the scenario was using, and I mentioned that he had the Fury, which comes from a purity seal, but I couldn't come up with the name of what, like, I couldn't get the name on the tip of my tongue, so later I remembered, oh, it's a purity seal, so I went in and grabbed a scan of that so people know what I'm referring to. The second one was the weight of the Falcon, because I did mention that the Falcon weighed about, 15.3 tons, and this is a source from the Halo Encyclopedia, so it just gives you, like, Halo Encyclopedia gives you, like, a lot of different descriptions for various items. You get, like, the length, the crew, the width, height, weight amounts, usually their armaments, and then usually a small paragraph of descriptions. What's the dog doing? I don't know what the dog is doing at the moment, but I would assume the dog is sleeping. Generally, that's what he does. And I believe... yes, this was taken from the Death Watch Core rulebook. So this... I can't really scan in on it that well, but there's a top... In the top right-hand corner, there's a height and weight description that says that while wearing their power armor, an unarmed Space Marine typically stands slightly over 2.1 meters tall and weighs between 500 and 1,000 kilograms. So that's just like the standard description that they have for weight masses for a Space Marine. As I did mention how much they weigh, though, that one was... That one kind of aged a little poorly in that scenario, because apparently the Space Marine 1 guide has official weight values for the Space Marine characters, like Titus, Leandros, and Sidonius, as well as like all the other characters in the cast, and they weigh way less than that. Like, oh my god. They weigh so much less than what's presented there. Additionally, I think I had... What was this next one? Oh, yes. I was just providing some examples for the sources of the Spartan 2's weight values. So I just went, like, point by point for some of these. So Spartan 2's generally weigh about 400, 500 kilos. They're stated to be a half ton. I think some of it is like 4.3 or 4.2, but generally speaking, it's about 500 kilos for every Spartan 2. So they're effectively half a metric ton. And then I think, there are other ones here that say 600, but this is for like Mark 6. So that's technically different. It's technically heavier and higher. I also have some scans from the Space Marine 1's Prima guide for the Iron Halo, because I did mention that the Iron Halo was a rare weapon, so apparently, according to the guide, it's only available as a personal weapon to, like, company champions and captains of the Ultramarines. It's kind of like Terminator armor, where it's very exclusive, so you can only really use it if you're in the club, basically. You need to be one of the more valuable members of the chapter. Otherwise, you're just not allowed to have it. Or, I guess, even see it. Except in battle. The rest of these are just general articles and things that I found on how hot plasma was. Because I was trying to find several different... basically sources to explain the general temperature range of plasma. In the scenario for the Space Marine Protagonist swap, because I spent so much time talking about plasma, because plasma is so integral to Covenant technology, you kind of have to address the point of how hot plasma is, because that's going to be the main, like, threshold that a person is going to have to deal with if the temperature range is simply too hot. And generally speaking, plasma, while it does come in different forms, like artificially or whatnot, like the most natural state of plasma that you'll see in the universe is typically in stars, usually. or like celestial bodies, not so much in planets. Like, while we do have the technology to engineer sort of artificial versions of plasma and cold types of plasma, those would not be considered like thermal versions. Those would not be standard. When people talk about plasma, they are primarily referring to superheated versions of plasma, and most of the articles that I could find on them, and any of the sources that I could find on the internet, primarily just refer to plasma in like the lowest temperature range of being like 11,000 degrees Celsius or 11,000 degrees Kelvin, but I believe Kelvin is like essentially an 100% equivocation to Celsius, so it's essentially the same thing as saying 11,000 degrees Celsius, all the way up to like about 1,000,000 degrees Celsius. And that might even be for plasma that's not even necessarily in the sun. Plasma, or rather not plasma, the heat of the sun directly is anywhere from about 5,500 degrees Celsius to about 20 million degrees Celsius. So if someone is walking around with an engineered weaponized version of plasma, unless it's a cold thermal version of plasma, unless it's specified to have a specific temperature range, you would generally assume it's producing plasma, the likes of which is found outside most planets, in between like star systems, or usually in stars themselves, because that is primarily where plasma comes from. That is almost its most natural given states, considering like stars are considered like a ball of gas, but they're technically like in sort of a liquidy, meltedy state that's constantly mixing between a liquid and a gaseous state, which is essentially what thermal plasma is. I think even non-thermal plasma still falls under that. It just has different temperature ranges. Does anyone have any particular questions before I continue? Oh yeah. Never mind. It is it's slightly higher for Kelvin than it is for Celsius, but generally, yeah, that's about 1,000,000 degrees. And then there's also like different temperature ranges for the sun. I'm just kind of mentioning, like, in case you're wondering, I'm just mentioning stuff that would be applicable to all of the Covenant weapons on the field. So whenever you put Protagonist swap someone into Halo, if they do not have a heat-resistant armor that can resist the temperature of the sun, they will literally get melted to death by plasma weapons. Because I'm essentially equating like most, if not all, plasma in fiction as being near the temperature of the sun, since that is scientifically how plasma functions. Surprised there are no questions. Usually there are questions like these. I didn't get too many on the previous Space Marine thing, but I was assuming you guys actually had something, or something of note. Well, at least I was kind of hoping that you did. I'll give it maybe another minute, and then I'll continue explaining. Actually, Rock and Alice, I'm surprised that you didn't have any questions, because you're a pretty avid Warhammer fan, as well as a Halo fan. Ooh. Yeah, I think we'll cover this. So the next thing that I was naturally wanting to cover was, feel free to interrupt me with questions, I'll read them. The next thing I was covering was specific heat indexes for certain materials, because in Halo we have several examples of titanium and tungsten being melted consistently by plasma weaponry. So tungsten usually has a heat index of about 5,900 degrees Celsius. Titanium is actually 3,200. I incorrectly said it was 4,400. But ultimately, 3,200 is more than half the temperature index of the surface of the sun. 5,900 is over the surface of the sun. So if you're capable of melting either of these things, you're already close to, if not above, the heat of the surface of the sun. Tungsten has flat out been melted by the heat of what's it called? Plasma before. And I think you could even make an argument that titanium A has a higher heat index than tungsten does, because titanium A is typically what outlines the ships and the starships in the UNSC, as well as their orbital stations. The tungsten part would only be the outer shell casing for their guns, usually like the Mac round itself, rather than the Mac round, like I guess the Mac, like it would only be the Mac slug, not the cannon that fires the slug. The tungsten would just be the round. So in order to burn through to the tungsten, you have to burn through the layer of titanium that's on the outside, meaning the titanium A would have to have a higher heat index than that. But titanium A is also considered a different form of titanium in universe. It's, I believe, according to the direct descriptions from the Halo Encyclopedia, which I'll put this one down later when Zim gets back, because I'll be able to more freely explain it. I believe the exact description that they use. Give me one moment. Where is it? Here we are. 258. Yes, the exact description that they use. Oh, wait, that's... Where is it? Not in the front of the... Oh, it must be in a different part of the... Okay. Well, they basically say that it's... Titanium A is strengthened on the molecular level. It's much, much more powerful than your typical forms of titanium anyway, because you're adding additional molecules to the structure, thus making it much, much harder to burn in like a traditional sense. So even if the melting point for it or the boiling point for it was like, I don't know, 3,300 degrees Celsius, it'd probably be a lot higher ordinarily, because there's extra molecules and parts of it that you're burning through. I believe it's also stated that it's reinforced against some forms of conventional damage, because it's mainly meant to stop, like, I want to say, physical projectiles, kinetic things, in some cases like some conventional thermal, but like not like super heavy there. Here it is, finally. Yeah, so it says that the armor, under the armor category, that ships of the line are plated with heavy titanium A armor, a form of titanium that has been specially strengthened on a molecular level. As much as 1/3 of a standard's military ship mass is armor. While this armor is highly effective against conventional damage, Covenant weaponry has proven to be capable of boiling through plates of armor that are meters thick. So, yeah, that source is like, what is it, page 315, the Halo Encyclopedia. So yeah, I'll put that down later in case anyone wants to see it. But essentially, like, the reason why Covenant weapons in Halo just melt UNSC ships and why they just kind of ignore their armor is because they're literally ignoring their armor. They're not actually throwing a kinetic slug at them. They're just completely ignoring the armor entirely by using a different substance and a different state of matter that just invalidates it, instead of throwing like a really, really large kinetic projectile. The UNSC ships, for the most part, are supposed to be reinforced against like other types of kinetic weaponry, mainly things like the Insurrection. The reason why I'm bringing this up, aside from the boiling point thing, is that basically every Spartan has the same kind of armor on their Mjolnir. So even if I did swap like a Space Marine into that scenario, I'm not giving them like that heat resistance. So even with that, they still end up getting boiled. So I'm just pointing out that there are a lot of factors that went into the UNSC getting tech and technology to save themselves from dying to the Covenant, and most times they still consistently got boiled or vaporized despite having armor or things like it that is like the highest conventional form of armor known to mankind, and they still couldn't do anything against them. There's also other types of scans that show like reasons why we should consider the Covenant weaponry to be like near the heat of the sun. So for one, almost all Covenant technology is reverse engineered from the Forerunners. It's literally made as like I guess a reverse or backwards compatible piece of tech. Mostly now to be fair, they're technically only imitative. They're not like innovative. They didn't really fully achieve the effects of the gravity technology and star jockey stuff that the Forerunners could do. But if I'm reverse engineering technology from a civilization that's designed to, engineer stars and engineer solar energy, I would assume that if the attempts at that yielded a form of energy known as plasma that is found in stars, I'm definitely going to assume that plasma is the heat of the sun if the intended purpose of it was to replicate an energy source, and that's what I got. They didn't succeed, but that also just means that the technology that they were trying to make was way better than what they themselves were capable of. Also, it might have had something to do with the fact that they based their entire society about a religion that was just trying to like worship the Forerunners. And the way they translated things in their language was done with a very specific intent. So there's also statements in the Halo Encyclopedia of them having basically stars being viewed as clay, that they have things like plasma jockeys, where they could just manipulate the suns of 1,000 worlds using powerful energy siphons and magnetic regulators. Yeah, this is just something that the Covenant, or that the Forerunners did all the time, and the Covenant basically tried to emulate that technology as best as they could. This is just the end of that page. Then there's also additional statements in the novels of like things like the Wraith mortars just vaporizing anything, like stated that titanium battle plate, concrete, or flesh is all vaporized. There's other examples where there's a bunch of Covenant standing in a room, and first strike they're going to fire energy shots at everyone. They're stated to have boiling energy coming from their shots. If they were fired into an area, it's stated that everything would be vaporized there. There's so many, like every space battle literally says that this thing got vaporized because it was touched. Plasma weapons in Halo, let's see. Oh, yes. Another example of other things getting vaporized in Halo. Hello, Seville. How you doing? I'm just going over some of the scans that I was providing for the Protagonist swap that I did recently. Most of these are just statements from Halo novels, Warhammer novels, encyclopedia. Y'all see the PoE 2 launch? I don't know what PoE is. Would you mind clarifying? That ship broke the game in 2 sites? Path of Exile. Oh. Did it now? That sounds kind of crazy. Never heard of the game breaking 2 sites. But like the plasma weapons in Halo have also melted Hunters before. And Hunters have like a battle plate sort of armor on their arm that's literally meant to be something taken off of like a Covenant ship. Two of them got vaporized just by getting shot by enough shots, along with all the dozens of Covenant troops that were standing next to them. This is just a scene where a bunch of Covenant were standing in a room aiming at the main cast and crew of like the Spartan 2s and Halsey. And because the Hunters fired on a group of people while they were holding the slip space crystal, all the other Covenant troops fired on their own Covenant troops because they did not want to destroy what they deemed to be the holy relic. And as a result, they were vaporized. Sorry, my dear friend, I feel powerful today. I feel at least 2A. Explain how this issue can be fixed. I don't know. I don't know how to solve that for you. Also, hello, Netgear. How you doing? Or Net 945. Called you Netgear for some reason. I believe there's also additional ones. Oh yeah. So after that point in the video, I basically started talking about how Space Marines can't really survive plasma consistently. So I have a couple sources from Battle for the Abyss, Chain of Command. This one didn't. This is a different one, but I'll get that. Dead Sky, Black Sun, where basically Space Marines just get kind of like, annihilated just by getting touched by a plasma shot. You check Twitch, there's 1.1 million people watching a login screen right now. Oh my god, is that true? That just sounds sad. Netgear is more accurate scaling. Do you want me to call you Netgear? I can call you Netgear. So this is just an example of a couple different word bearers firing some shots into an area. And it hit a World Eater Space Marine in the chest. It literally states that it cooked him in his armor and went right through his chest, cauterized his wound, killed him in a single shot. There's, I think, a couple other examples from the same novel of this guy wasn't hit directly by the shots of it, or sort of like nicked by it. And it says the white and blue of his armor is already scored by bullet wounds and scorched by plasma burns. So like, yeah, even if the plasma burn doesn't hit them directly, it still like scorches their armor. If it does hit them directly, it blows straight through their bodies. There's examples in the Chains of Command novel from the Ultramarine Omnibus where a bunch of Night Lords fired a couple plasma guns into a gun nest, and they just basically incinerated. They killed a bunch of people, but the backblast of their guns incinerated themselves. Aren't World Eaters supposed to be more battle hardened than Space Marines? Yes and no. Like, some of them are more akin to fighting more consistently, yeah, but like their armor would be the same. You could maybe say their armor would be in a slightly worse condition, but ultimately the point is that they still experience plasma the same way. I've got examples between like the Ultramarines, obviously Night Lords, and World Eaters, all of whom are three different legions entirely, all getting melted by the same plasma weapons. And these are both between the Horus Heresy in the 31st millennia and the second founding, the Age of Darkness in the 41st millennia. So no amount of time or progress I say progress, there wasn't really any progress. No amount of time skip between 31st millennia and 41st millennia improved their armor enough to make a difference or to change things. They still die to usually like 1 or 2 shots to plasma. And I say 2 shots in that any shot that could skim their armor, hit parts of their shoulder pads or parts of like the sides of their legs, they'll usually survive. But if they take a shot to the chest, they're dead. There are some other scans from Chains of Command as well. I think this is one of the Space Marine commanders that gets shot in the face, and it just says that that he couldn't move quickly enough to avoid the third shot that was fired at him. He avoided the first 2. And it says white heat exploded in his face, searing the flesh from the side of his skull as the Raptor fired his plasma pistol. He fell back blind with pain and didn't see the crackling sword blow that hacked his left arm from his body. So not only does he get part of his face burnt off by the plasma pistol, it flash blinded him long enough for the person who shot his face off to cut off his arm in the same process. So it like clearly killed him. He's also like a sergeant, so he would have like slightly better armor and weapons, but not really. Additionally, there's some examples from Dead Sky Black Sun of Uriel, which is the main character, basically getting his armor cut to pieces by plasma cutters when he was captured by some trader marines. Again, it's just a different type of plasma technology being used to cut open his armor. It sliced through his armor pretty effectively and cut into his body, and it was scarring his flesh black. So between plasma pistols, plasma rifles, plasma cutters, pretty much everything plasma related in Warhammer cuts through Space Marines like butter. There's very little resistance at all. So I think we could definitively say that plasma weapons in Halo should do just fine. This is one of the broken scans that did not load correctly. So I actually have one down here that I use for this. So this is supposed to be Titus and Leandros during Space Marine 1. The reason I bring this up is that I was talking about during the scenario when they were getting shot by the plasma shots that technically Space Marines, for the most part, if they're named Space Marines, but also Space Marines and Space Marine 1, sometimes walk around without their helmets on. The Space Marines in Space Marine 1 do not walk around with their helmets on. So anyone could just shoot them in the head and burn them to death because there's no protection up there. Granted, they'd probably still die even if the armor was there, but if there's a glancing shot, at least, there might be a higher chance of survival. Plus, having an armor on is obviously or having a helmet on obviously gives you some advantages in visuals, pressurized armor, and some other functions. They don't even wear the armor, so technically, not only would plasma weapons work more consistently, but any sort of kinetic weapons that the Covenant would have, like needle rifles and such, and spiker rounds, would also work consistently because these people are walking around without any helmet protection. So, yeah. There's also like a lot of Warhammer novels where characters on the front covers of Warhammer novels in particular, most named characters or characters that you visually see don't usually have helmets. It's usually the group of Space Marines that they're with that has helmets, but a lot of named Space Marines walk around without their helmets on. That is a death sentence in any sort of matchup or any sort of scenario where they're put in another universe, because they're basically walking around as in 7-foot tall headshot target, and that is not what you want. You don't want to have that. That's the worst possible thing that could happen to you. So let me go back up here so we can continue on. Man, I put a lot of these in here. My goodness. Oh wait, no, I already overshot it. Okay. So, what is this one? Oh, yes. So, there's a couple different set of scans here that mainly come from the claims that I made about Space Marines just kind of assuming the potency and effectiveness of a lot of weapons. There are plenty of statements like this in the Ultramarines Omnibus, but also like things like the Horus Heresy. Not so much the Horus Heresy all the time because the heresy hasn't happened yet. But Space Marines have a habit of saying things like, oh, well, this weapon won't work against me. It's like, you're using incendiaries. Are you mad? Like, would that really work against me when I'm a Space Marine? Clearly, you have no prior fighting experience. Now, I'm not saying this to point out to the reliability of, like, Uriel or any of the Space Marines as a source. I'm just saying that Space Marines have a habit of going and claiming things or what they claim to be facts about a weapon or a set of tactics in their universe being effective against their armor and thinking that people are just mad for wanting to do that. Not saying other people don't do that. Plenty of people do that, but they do it a lot. And they presuppose that mostly kinetic weapons, laser-based weapons, and fire-based weapons, that being incendiaries, do not work against Space Marines. That's not really true, but they assume that to be true. And that's more so the problem. Because you don't want to have that kind of like that lack of open-mindedness when you're walking around in hostile territory with an alien species that has advanced weaponry. Also, there are like other examples of like incendiary kinetic weapons from the Covenant technology. So the brutes, for example, in the later portions of the Halo Reach campaign, start showing up with spiker rounds. And many of their, technically without, they would have their flame grenades. I know they have plasma grenades in the game, but they would canonically have flame grenades there. Their flame grenades are stated to have around, I think, 2,000 degrees. They're stated to be around 2,000 degrees centigrade or 2,100 degrees centigrade, which is 2,000 degrees Celsius. That's pretty hot. It's not enough to burn standard titanium, but that is enough to burn like most human flesh out and pretty much vaporize it almost immediately. What's up, guys? What did I miss? Zim, if you're reading this, Riot launched a physical League of Legends TCG right now. Weird enough as it plays very differently to Legends of Runeterra despite sharing an artwork. I'll send it to the card game chat so you can check it. Oh, hello, Nguyen. Also, that sounds interesting. I'm sure Zim will be very interested in that. Unfortunately, he is currently in the restroom, dying. And it usually takes him a while. Actually, how long has this stream been going on? About 35 minutes? If he's not back by now, he should be back in under the next 30 minutes. Generally. Also, I have another scan here of just Space Marines basically assuming that anything that's like bullets or lasers is deadly to anyone not clad in suits of holy power armor, blessed by the Tech Marines and imbued with the spirits of battle. The shame both teams lose to the mark of Daddy. I mean, Kane, Dean. Okay, that was a weird admission. Also, hello, Pimp Demon. Yeah, so the Space Marines will just assume bullets and lasers don't really work on them that effectively. So if they were to come into contact with, let's say, a group of individuals that is firing just bullets, even if the bullets are way stronger than the bullets they're familiar with and are strong enough to penetrate their armor, they will not assume if they've seen them or if they have reason to believe they're like auto guns or kinetic rounds. They will not assume they're a danger to them, and they're not going to, dodge because they have no reason to dodge. They'll assume they're not a threat, which means kills can sometimes be acquired off of their ignorance. What the hell is an omission? An omission is usually some kind of like, or I guess admission. It's more so like you admitting something directly. Oh yeah, this one was a funny source. So Uriel Ventress was running through the battlefield in Nightbringer, and he gets shot by a lasgun round in the chest, and it basically hits the center of his breastplate, running molten, running a molten amount of like heat essentially, and he fell to his knees despite the armor being able to disperse energy rounds, and the chaplain next to him was like, "Guys, see, the Emperor protects." Let's go. Everyone rallied around him because they just assume, oh, that's obviously proof that the Emperor is with us. We can never be defeated. Even though it was just a lucky shot, like they'll just assume, Space Marines will also assume and assign like reason to things in battle directly because of the Emperor, even if they don't know the reason why that happens, even if it's just like a lucky shot. And in this case, the shot still affected Uriel. He fell to his knees, and it was directly burning the eagle in his chest. Well, I think there's also some other statements later. Oh, no, that's from later on. Well, yeah, that's a good example of what I'm referring to. Wait, are you saying Space Marines are muscle-headed tanks? In the way that they think, yes. Well, no, I would say muscle-headed super soldiers. I would not call them tanks. Even in the Warhammer universe, Terminators are basically considered the standard tanks. Usually, whenever you see descriptions of Terminators, they strictly refer to them as Space Marines that can essentially become tanks. The language is almost always in reference to them being a tank, which would imply that the standard Space Marine is nowhere near the level of a tank or near the effectiveness of a tank, which is also backed up by their weight mass ratio and also the amount of damage that Space Marines consistently output with their physical hands, and also the fact that Space Marines consistently get killed by bolter rounds, whereas tanks can just deflect bolter rounds off their sheer armor. Space Marine gets half his body blown up and lives. The Emperor protects comps of alone. Yeah, no, they will assume that the Emperor is responsible for their good fortune, even though that's not how the Emperor technically works. Usually, his blessings are usually often very visual and very obvious. So here's another scan from the Dark Angels Primarch, Lionel Johnson, his Primarch novel. This is the scan I was talking about when I talked about the reason why Space Marines actually resist the energy rounds of certain like weapons, or especially las guns. It's because the way that the las guns work is that, or the way the cereramite armor works is that it disperses the force of the impact by sending it around portions of the armor to weaken it. And we see an example here of a Space Marine that's running around a corridor, and he gets shot by a fully charged las gun round, a maximum las gun round, and it drills into his, I think it's like his shoulder, and it essentially, it basically sends him flying backwards into a bulkhead. And it states that it was a lethal killing force. It just got dispersed by the shot. So a fully powered lasgun round, if it were hitting them normally, could either kill them or could massively incapacitate a Space Marine. It's just that the armor of the cereramite armor makes it weaker because it disperses the energy everywhere. But even the dispersed energy still can damage the armor and damage the Marine. Hot take: Jack of Rippers versus Chapter Master isn't close. I don't know who Jack of Rippers is. Yes, we have another source of that did not get loaded. Give me one moment. Oh no, my Wi-Fi's failing. Oh no. Are you guys able to see this one clearly? Record of Ragnarok? Are you able to see the text on this one clearly? I mean, you could always take a picture and scan in if you really needed to. This is a scan from one of the Halo comics. I believe this is Halo Uprising, specifically the Legacy Collection version of it. There is an author section where the authors are basically talking about a bunch of different questions and things they were asked about the procedure for making comics and how this works in the Haloverse, how stories are told and whatnot. I'm watching it for TV, so now I'm far away. Damn you, Pip Demon. Rockin' Alice and Ezio, if you're still there, tell me if it can be seen. I need to know if it's visually apparent. Because this scan in particular is important. Okay. So the context for why I'm bringing this up now is that basically this was in relation to, I believe, hold up there. Hold up one moment. Yes. This was in relation to the UNSC weapons getting stronger over time because I was trying to explain to Zim, as I've tried to explain to people multiple times, that Halo weapons are never the same strength from like year to year to year. They keep getting stronger and stronger and stronger, at least the ones from the UNSC do. So the pistols that they have at the beginning of the war, for example, are way weaker than the pistols that they have at the end of the war. We have direct statements from Kevin Grace that just like all modern militaries, the UNSC is always developing new weapon systems and updating existing systems. And the Spartan's Mjolnir armor was in a state of constant evolution and testing. Once the Spartans proved to be humanity's best hope against the Covenant, it's hard to find time in the Halo video games to get this down to a level of nitty gritty detail about the universe. So we love the chance to go there in stories like Bloodline. Yeah, I think I've heard in the past the Space Marines of now are way smarter than the ones at the beginning of life of the Warhammer franchise. Well, that's just because there's like more details of the lore now. They've given them more stories. That in the more recent versions of Space Marines with Primaris have gotten like better upgrades. But generally speaking, when it comes to the weapon systems, a good example of these that I use, let me scroll back up here. I'll only have to do this like a few more times. Actually, only once, probably. Yeah, a good example of this is, I believe... Oh, no, I don't have this one. Well, actually, no, I could just put this right here. Then I can mute it. Oh, well. Hang on, let me just mute this. So... This is a cutscene in Halo Wars. I don't know how well you guys can see this. Wait, can you still see it now? Or no? When I'm scanned in full screen? Feel free to let me know, guys. You can see, is it full screen though? I need details. I feel like a year or two ago, Warhammer wasn't a thing in the server. Probably. Yes. Okay, good. So basically, this is the pistol at the time. This is just a scene with the Arbiter coming to grab Professor Anders. And during this scene, Sergeant Forge just has like a normal pistol. This is about 25-35, so this is not yet the Halo 1 pistol, the Halo Reach pistol. And it takes him, I think, about 6 or 7 rounds. Yeah, he shoots him like 6 or 7 times, and it doesn't really do anything to them. Which Arbiter? I believe it's the Ripamorye. Or Ripamorye. I probably mispronounced his name. I don't know what Warhammer it is, but it's the 1A verse, so I'd say yes, it's visible. It's definitely not a 1A verse, but I don't know what that has to do with. I don't know what that has to do with whether or not you can see the video. When I said it was visible, I meant like the what's on screen. The better one. I don't know if I'd say he's a better one. But basically, in this scene here, he shoots him like 6 or 7 times on his shots. Like, I counted the number of shots. It was about 6 or 7, and it doesn't do anything to him. And then in the books, later on, we get examples from Halo First Strike when Fred and the rest of, like, what's left of Blue Team, like, I guess Will, Vash, Tim, and Will, Vin, and Min. I can't remember the rest of Will's team. And Fred basically go to get Halsey under Sword Base, and they unlock the Halo 1 and Halo 2 battle rifles out of their equipment lockers. And Fred defines this weapon as being 30% larger and longer than the standard barrel. It's higher caliber. He says it's far better than the standard issue assault rifle or the standard issue pistol. And then when he uses it, as well as when Kelly uses it, and they use it against an elite, they fire it at a standard elite in camo, and it goes through its shields in 2 shots. Previously, the Sergeant Forge's pistol took 7 shots, and it didn't even stop his shield or penetrate his armor. In Kelly's case, she shot through the shield and killed the elite in 3 shots. Something that a full pistol with a magazine wasn't even capable of doing individually. So the difference between even like 2535 and 2552's pistols is orders of magnitude. Like one of them is many, many times stronger than the previous ones. Because I mentioned on everything that scales high, but I remember you and Zim mentioning it's 1A and alive, or I'm confusing with someone else. Another verse? No, we said we didn't believe it was 1A, that people scale it to 1A, and we disagreed with that. So we did mention that people scaled it to 1A. We just said that we didn't agree with that conclusion because of many of the statements made in the Warhammer verse and people's lack of knowledge on the warp. When you get a protagonist swap Leon and the other guy I don't know, but you know, that's not really like Pimp. That doesn't really nail it down. Like who is the other guy that I know but you don't know? Like who are you referring to? Is this a zombie related guy? But that's because the Arbiter got 10 times stronger shield. Actually, obviously, the Arbiter technically doesn't even have state of the art. According to the some of the art books, so he actually has armor for a suicide mission. So his armor, if anything, would be worse than Major's, and at the best, maybe equivalent to an elite miner. He probably has worse armor than them. It is lad. Oh yes, zombie. Oh, probably Frank West then. Yeah, so that means that even something like the Arbiter's armor, which would be worse than everyone else's armor, still can take like a full magazine of pistol rounds, and the armor doesn't get penetrated easily at all, and neither does the shields. Halo 1 combat pistol kills an elite in 3 shots to the head and penetrates the shield and penetrates the armor. That's a massive difference in capabilities. You got the art of the armor, which is clearly superior. Yeah, whatever that means. There's also examples for this happening with the what's it called? The Halo assault rifle as well in Halo Wars. Oh yeah, we also have examples of the submachine guns killing some of the honor guards. So I'm just muting this so that I don't have to deal with any sort of like other stuff, but yeah, so this is Sergeant Forge fighting him the second time. Now I want you to notice how many rounds he puts into this guy's chest. Nothing. Like, that was like half a magazine, and it didn't do anything to his armor at all. I don't even know if the Arbiter in this case had shields. He does manage to shoot out the energy shield from his hand, but in this scene, when he shoots him with this pistol, he's shooting his hand. He shoots him about 7 or 8 times in the hand with a gun, and it doesn't do anything until the final shot. So I think that should be clear enough that the weapons in Halo, even during the middle point of the war, are way weaker than the ones later on. There's also examples of the AR assault rifle being better here. This is during Halo 1 in the Halo the Flood novel. We see Master Chief just basically running through the corridor of the Pillar of Autumn, and he shoots a trio of bursts at one of the elites, and it basically goes right through his shields, causes him to flare and overload, kills him in under a magazine. So it not only penetrated his armor, it went through his shields. Previously, Sergeant Forge just shot the armor. We don't even know if he was shooting the shields in question. He might have been shooting the shields, but even if he didn't meaningfully damage either one. End of the war, the MA5B assault rifle will shred shields and will also shred the armor underneath them. Just wait until they create a pistol which can penetrate top tier Halo Infinite banished armor with one bullet. I don't think the banished armor is that much better. Maybe like certain members of the Bloodstar. Hello, Jeremy. What's this? This is a video where I'm sort of a stream first of its kind, where we're going over sort of the scans that I provided from the previous Protagonist swap video on the channel. I'm doing this because it was a Protagonist swap for the Space Marine 1 crew, Captain Titus and his squad, going through the events of Halo Reach. I'm doing this because I wanted to show people all the scans and things I got for that project, because it took me a lot of research, a lot of books, and a lot of information to go through all of that. Is Mangler flexing a source? Well, it's also like, I want to show you guys that like there are a lot of places where you can find these. I'll have the sources listed. If you need them, I can go get them. If you're interested in reading, go ahead and support the official release. Like, these are definitely some good books. Like, I do this for multiple reasons, but it's mainly just to show everyone like what it is I'm referring to when I quote certain things. Oh, did I say banished? I meant Promethean Knight. I mean, I guess. There's also examples of the UNSC battle rifle being better than the assault rifle. So the Halo 2 battle rifle in lore is actually way stronger than the Halo 1 assault rifle. It will go through an elite shields in either one trio of bullets or two at maximum and kill them if they're aiming for their head. So already it's about as powerful as the Halo 1 Magnum is, in that, well, and probably more effective because it can fire 3 bullets at once as opposed to just firing one shot individually. And it's obviously way stronger than the assault rifles from earlier points in the war. So this kind of lines up with other examples of the statements that Kevin Grace said about the UNSC constantly updating their technology all the time. There's also statements from Frank O'Connor when he was talking about the designs and the reasons for why he made the Mjolnir armor like the way that it was, why design-wise it looks the way that it does in Halo 4. And he was actually talking about like nanomachines designing repairs on some of the scars of the armor. And he was pointing out that some people's complaints about nanomachines weren't really valid because they're assuming nanomachines in like the 21st century or whatever are going to work the same as they do in the 22nd to the 23rd. And that's just not true because technology is going to evolve and change. So like the developers do acknowledge that in Halo, tech is constantly being made and evolved all the time. So the previous iteration of the tech is no longer valid or considered like, I guess, what's the term? Up to date. It's outdated. Nanomachines, so yeah. I like the battle rifle more. Its firing sounds more fun. It does kind of sound more fun. I think the Halo 3 battle rifle canonically is the strongest one in the lore. Which is kind of weird because, like, gameplay-wise, it definitely doesn't reflect that. But, like, these are only the feats for the Halo 2 battle rifle. There aren't any feats for the Halo 3 battle rifle in lore because there aren't any, like, Halo 3 novels, really. Additionally, I also wanted to show that the what's it called? I also wanted to show some sources from Halo Silent Storm. This is at the beginning of the Human Covenant War, like the very beginning, the first 6 months, when Master Chief and the rest of his Spartans are running around trying to accomplish certain Spec Ops missions, boarding mainly like Covenant ships and trying to detonate nukes inside of them. In one of the scenes, they end up going into a corridor and they have to fight a bunch of elites by firing some of their MA5K, like their cut down carbine versions of the assault rifles. And most of their rounds ended up deflecting off of the energy barriers. They basically had to empty, in some cases, an entire magazine from the MA5K and then reload and keep firing to get down like a single shield. So like beginning of the war, assault rifles sometimes took a full magazine, if not more. Middle of the war took probably a full magazine. And then by the end of the war, they were shredding people in under a magazine and killing them. Halo needs a 40-year time skip so that we can get to the 23rd century. They're not. What do you mean 23rd century? Pimp, you understand that we're in the 26th century in Halo, right? The 2500s. If you wanted to go to the 23rd century, you'd be going back in time, not forward. You silly goose. Anyway. So, I also have some sources for what I claimed in that video about certain high-powered weapons from the UNSC being able to penetrate Mark 6 Mjolnir armor. So, in Halo New Blood, Buck, specifically with his shields down, he had his armor penetrated by a really high caliber wide weapon that he stated previously would have had a shot that its individual shots would have cut his shields in half. And I believe based on the range that it was at, it was some form of shotgun. We're never told what the rifle is, but it's clearly like a high powered rifle in their world. And this is tech taken from an old man that is like mostly recruiting former UNSC Marines and UNSC ODSTs. So most of their tech is UNSC grade or is a weapon like that. So that basically means that any sufficiently high-powered rifle can cut through the higher-end titanium grade Mark 6 Mjolnir armor once the shields are down. This is also reflected in some other scans that we have from like the Spartan 4 guide, because the Spartan 4 guidebook basically says that Spartans are not recommended to go out onto the field without their energy shields, which would imply that most forms of weaponry could hurt them because they're strong enough to actually penetrate the armor. 27th, your nano talk confuses me. Nah, fam, it was a station. That I don't think that was a station. Like a station. Do you have any idea how big a Stasian Gauss rifle is? Do you know how much those things weigh? A little bit too big. Oh yeah. Additionally, the 3 meters. 3 meters. You can't. Okay, you don't use meters as a weight amount. That's length. That's not width. Or that's length, not weight. Sorry. You need the weight. Nah, they can tank it. I mean, the Spartans could probably tank a station round 10 kilos. It's not 10 kilos. It's like 100 or 200 kilos. They weigh 20 manglers. True. Additionally, the Mark 6 series guns, the ones that I've mentioned before, all the various variants, the Halo Reach variants, Halo 1 variants, all that stuff, they're actually supposed to be considered not as powerful as other weapons issued by the armed forces of the UNSC. It's just that they have a very good power to weight effectiveness. So in terms of their consistency, for most of the events of the war, the M6 series weapons are not as strong as their other variants. Meaning, until the events of Halo 1, pistols never really outclassed any other weapons in the UNSC. This is important because it means that almost every weapon would upscale from what the pistols could do ordinarily, which would upscale all of the elite shields pretty significantly. That would mean that you're pretty much never going to have any hope of penetrating their shields. I bring this up because Zem mentioned whether or not the bolter rounds would actually would penetrate the shields, because a fully loaded assault rifle could penetrate elite shields in game. That's not lore accurate, as I've kind of already established. Like throughout most of the war, the UNSC weapons are constantly improving, and technically, I'll just be flat out honest. The bolter round is weaker than an end of war version of a UNSC rifle. because the UNSC rifles fire 7 point, like if we're going even by like caliber rounds, because they're stated to be at 75 caliber, they fire a 7.62 millimeter round, which is effectively the equivalent of firing a light machine gun round. So practically the same thing as a 75 caliber round. So even if we go by the equivocation fallacy, by using calibers and saying that like this unit of measurement gives us all the information we need and feats don't matter, even though that's objectively untrue. Even if we commit that fallacy and put both of them under the same conditions, the UNSC AR by weapon like amounts alone, by just caliber amounts alone, would already be equivalent to the bolter. Remember when dozens of Spartan 2s died by falling? It wasn't dozens of Spartan 2s, it was only 4. A dozen of them got injured. It was funny because during the events of that same battle, Noble 6, it was a Spartan 3 that was younger and had like basically the same armor, survived orbital re-entry. But they're like, yeah, stronger Spartans died from falling into trees. And I'm like, Eric Nolan, this is why you're not allowed to write like Halo novels anymore. Because you make stupid mistakes like this, like killing off characters when they're not important. Or killing off characters when you shouldn't be doing that. That's not much better. That actually is way better. Surviving orbital re-entry is much better than falling out of a pelican at like hundreds of thousands of feet and then dying. What are these? Frag grenade. Oh, yes. I also have some feats from Halo Oblivion, one of the novels that's a sequel to Silent Storm at the very beginning of the Human Covenant War, that shows that frag grenades at the beginning of the war, when they're actually fired at one of these elites, basically just kind of miffs their shields. They don't actually, they don't one-shot elites. Elites can tank a frag grenade to their shield pretty easily. And as I've kind of already established, like most of the weapons in Halo scale up. So if an assault rifle does this much damage, a shotgun's doing more damage, a sniper rifle's doing more damage, and a frag grenade's doing more damage. And a frag grenade is like the strongest thing an infantry can use outside of like a rocket launcher or obviously a grenade launcher. And while it can take down an elite shields, it's usually like, I think in this case, like either 1 or 2. Actually, no, my bad. This is not 1 grenade. That's 2 grenades. He took 2 grenades to the face, to like both of his flanks, and it took down his energy shields, but he was still mostly fine. Railgun over a frag grenade. Railgun's probably stronger than the frag grenade, but the railgun was not a standard weapon. That was like a heavier weapon that came around later in the war. I don't think they had those at the beginning. All they had was like the Gausses, but the Gausses are not. They're not exactly the same thing, because Mac-based weaponry and things that are based on like Gauss technology isn't. I mean, I guess they technically are classified as a railgun, but they're not necessarily, because they don't work the way that the station does.
So, how is the streaming going?
It's been going good so far. People have been jumping in and out. I've just been explaining the difference between weapons in Halo at the middle points of the war, beginning points of the war, at the end points of the war, because I was trying to illustrate why bullets and stuff don't pierce elite shields, and when they do.
All right. That's good.
Yes, so this is I just showed you an example of what 2 frag grenades to an elite shields does at the beginning of the war. Breaks their shields, but they still tank it. In Halo 1's novel, in the Flood, at the end of the war, when they throw a frag grenade at an elite, it, according to what's described in this, it blew them into bloody ribbons and shredded the jackals next to them that happened to be near them, and then sent pieces of shrapnel flying across the stairwell to slam into the bulkhead. So the difference between the frag grenades is also different, because this is like 30 years after the events of Silent Storm, if the assault rifles and the pistols and like most of their weapons got better, we would assume their frag grenades got better. And the difference between a frag grenade, like if I threw 2 frag grenades at you and you had an energy shield or armor that tanked it, even if it did drop the shield and it buffeted you a little bit, that's nowhere near as powerful as a frag grenade that blew you up, full shields included, and turned you into mincemeat, and then also killed everyone around you, and then had enough force to still send the shrapnel flying across the room. That is a way more powerful grenade. Nah, Hydra stronger than frag. The Hydra's probably stronger than a frag since it's firing like micro missiles. Mangler, I need to. I know it's unrelated, but you have to read this. I read the sentence that you. Was that following like another message, or were you just like, oh, just this sentence?
Just that sentence.
Oh, by the way, Zim, Nguyen wanted to tell you that Riot launched a physical League of Legends TCG thing.
I'm so fucking mad about it. I'm gonna react to it later. I'm so mad about it. God darn it.
You're just like, no. Were you? Did you invest too much money, or was it just bad timing?
No. It's just that So you already know they have their own card game online, but it kind of failed after a while.
Yeah, Legends of Runeterra, I believe.
Every picture in that card game, if it's not from the default like League of Legends game, it's ripped from Legends of Runeterra. So they're reusing every art asset they have, and it's so annoying.
So it just pisses you off because they didn't come up with like new original artwork.
I forgot there are small indie developers like me and you, bro. I forgot the $1 billion company is just a small developer at the end of the day, man. I keep forgetting that.
I went on Capitid's channel on mammals versus birds versus insects versus fishes poll, and someone brought up mammals would win because they have RC associated outer. What the fuck?
I love him doing. Is Arceus even a mammal?
Were they talking about Pokemon or were they talking about IRL? Because the Arceus is not real. Last time I checked, I think he'd be firmly disqualified. Can Superman pass the time test? I don't know what the time test is. Hang on, I'm gonna go get a drink. I'll be right back.
All right. Also, the Tim test. What's the Tim test? Real ass funny thing. I did play Marvel Rivals last night. Actually a pretty solid game. Especially for the especially for the reasonable price of fucking free. It's also cross-platform, so if you guys actually, I might start streaming it alongside League of Legends every now and again. So if you guys wanna play with me on a game, you know, Marvel Rivals is free.
It is free, apparently.
Yeah, no, I'm just letting people know if they ever want to try like playing with me on a stream. I'm currently playing Marvel Rivals. Not right now, but like, I mean, like I picked the game up. It's actually not bad.
My sister told me she and I think her boyfriend were going to try it out, so I might give it a shot. It's only if she migrates over from Overwatch to Marvel Rivals fully, I'll probably have to.
So,
I'll just play both.
I will say that if you're already playing Overwatch, there's probably not too much news. It just has a destructible environment. That's the main difference, and the characters.
Well, it's more so because I would have more people playing the same game, but like technically that's fine. Tim test, Mangler, not time test, and it's a test where Tim tries to guess your secret identity. Tim Drake, I don't know who that is.
Tim Drake, I believe is the third Robin.
I have no idea.
I'll say I think he's supposed to be among the smarter of the Robins. I think he is the smartest Robin.
Yes, probably.
How many more scans do we have to get through?
A while. honestly, I'll probably skip a few of these because many of them are like not repeat scans, but they say the same thing.
I was gonna say, because like best case scenario, you got like an hour and a half.
Oh, I can do this in an hour and a half.
All right.
Another hour and a half or an hour and a half total?
Like an hour and a half total from you still have an hour and a half from where I'm talking right now.
Oh, we'll get done before then.
Okay.
Yeah, so I'll hurry it up. So in Halo Oblivion, there is a feat where, well, it's sort of like a statement of what the Mjolnir armor is capable of surviving, where John is explaining that there's a bunch of extra dust that's held up over this like rim area in part of like some part of like the canyon that they're in, and he says that essentially that there's a few thousand tons worth of like dust up there, and it's gonna blow down, but like we'd be fine as Spartans if we weren't swept away by it. But most of the first platoon's gonna be crushed, and anyone without a self-contained air supply would suffocate. So this is one of the scans I referred to when I talk about Spartan Mjolnir armor being way stronger than just small building level or building level or large building level. A few thousand tons of force, if it were to just hit you at like a normal speed under like 100 miles an hour, would still be city block level. If it was going like fast enough, it might be multi-city block. That's very, very like... That's much stronger than large building level. Large building level is everything from like, 2 to like 10 tons. That's where most people think like strong super soldiers sit, right? This is orders of magnitude above that. We're talking like hundreds, maybe thousands of times. So the reason I bring that up is that like technically anything that could shake or even move a Spartan in a meaningful manner is very, very powerful and very strong. Fuel rod guns being one of them, and plasma grenades, mortars. It essentially means that any Covenant technology that's capable of not only crushing, but also like damaging the armor with its whatever force it has, would probably be capable of penetrating the Astartes armor. And here's some examples of bolter rounds just killing Space Marines, because I mentioned earlier that bolter rounds could penetrate their shields. I have a couple sources here from Battle for the Abyss. If you want to go see some of these things, I would say like go buy a copy of Battle Abyss or find a PDF or something. There's usually like the whole novel covers examples of like traitor Marines fighting other Marines, killing them with plasma weapons, bolter weapons, whatever have you. And there's so many consistent examples of them being shot in the chest and having their armor penetrated or dying. What is it? I have like 5 sources for basically the same thing. I don't need to mention this now. This is just a source for the focus rifle being electromagnetically guided plasma. Source for the Warthog being 3.3 tons. Oh yeah, I was technically incorrect about this. So I mentioned this to Zim later during the second thing. I said it was 3.7 tons in the video. So why this matters is that even if the Space Marines were to try and get inside of the Warthog, it wouldn't even move because they'd be heavier than the Warthog itself. They might actually collapse it. So it's a worse circumstance than if it was than what I presented it to be. I undersold the crisis. What happened to the Zim? Is he gone again? Has he been lost to us? Oh yes, he's been muted.
Yeah, a package got delivered, and I gotta brush my teeth real quickly, so I'll be back in like 5 minutes.
Yeah, I don't think anyone in the domain would or even care about the outside from a galactic threat. If I could, I'm super right. I mean, yeah, you're technically right. No one in the domain would really care. They don't have a reason to. This is also something I wanted to mention, is that technically the Mjolnir suits and also any energy shields from the Covenant, because the Mjolnir technology is reverse engineered from the Covenant, any energy shields that you see in Halo is they're kind of like the way they activate is that anything that touches them a centimeter above the armor triggers the energy shield. Even Master Chief himself can trigger his own energy shield if he attempts to touch another portion of his armor with his hand. Like if he tries to touch his left hand with his right hand, he will trigger the energy shield. You guys are migrating to Marvel Rivals, and I guess I'll play Warframe. I'm not going to migrate to Marvel Rivals. I would play if I were to play Marvel Rivals, I would play both of them. And I'd probably spend most of my time on Overwatch. Primarily, because I prefer playing Overwatch.
Ezio, why can't you just play Marvel Rivals, bro? Just download the shaders, bro.
Didn't you hear him speaking through the echoing voice of God from the sky? In order to speak with him, you must consult with the elder gods. Is that what I need to talk to him? That's crazy. That's crazy.
It's not on PS4. That's fair.
Yeah, so basically this is, in case you're wondering, Zim, this is the source where the energy shield activates above the Mjolnir armor, about a centimeter above their armor, so... Yeah, so if you try to melee, I was incorrect about that. I was like, oh yeah, it won't activate. No, I was wrong. If you try to melee an elite, their energy shield will activate unless you can somehow get underneath a centimeter of their armor without hitting them. Which I think that's unlikely. Oh yeah, these are just sources of a fight from at the end of First Strike, or not First Strike, Fall of Reach, where John fights a Ranger elite, and he's just punching him in the face over and over again because he's in close quarters and he's trying to wrestle the gun out of his face, or out of his hands. And he constantly punches him back and forth. He actually downs the shields, and then by the event of the third page, the shields have regenerated, and then he shoots him with a plasma pistol shot again. So even if you were to try and fight an elite in melee combat, there's a chance that an elite will just regenerate their shields mid-strike sometimes. This also happens in Halo Reach. Zim, you might be familiar with this because you've probably seen this cutscene a lot. When Noble 6 dies and he disarms the Zealots, he takes out the Zealot's shields. The Zealot backs off for like 2 seconds, and then his shields are back. It's like almost instantaneous, like that. It's very fast. I don't have a new gen console yet. It is worth the 4 times the amount here, so it would take me more time to get the money to buy it. That's understandable. Here's the one you guys might like. So, did you guys know that the cannon weight of Titus's squad is 750 pounds in their full armor? According to the guide, I thought it was 750 kilos. I thought they made a mistake, but no, they're all consistently listed as 750 pounds according to the official guidebook. For context, 750 pounds is like 30, I think it's like 35, 400 something kilos, which is like, actually no, I think it's like 200, 300 something kilos. That's less than that of a Spartan. That's actually around what an elite normally weighs. So they actually don't even have the muscle mass to overpower an elite. Surprisingly. I forgot about this scan when I was going through the guides. When I was going through not the guides, the video initially, because I was like, oh, I'm not going to bring this up, but whatever, it won't be a problem. It won't be a problem. And then I was like, oh, wait, man, hang on a minute. If they don't even weigh a ton, that's 750 pounds? Oh, no. They weigh less than an elite. Yeah, we spoke of the truth of the sponsor. Yeah, this also confirms that Leandros is actually like very inexperienced, and he also runs into battle to attempt to prove himself because he feels shame for getting his former commander killed. So I can actually just argue in the scenario he was like super trigger happy. Here are some statements from the encyclopedia guides. We're almost done, guys. Only like 10 more scans. That basically elites are trained from their childhood in like all manner of weapons and hand-to-hand combat. They're stated to be capable of. They're trained as soon as they can hold a weapon. They essentially have like an anti-nepotism society where Sangheli's elites never see their fathers because, and they never know their fathers because they want their children to be raised in an environment where they don't feel like anything is given out to them and they constantly have to prove themselves. So no matter what household you're born into, it's a massively competitive society when it comes to martial prowess and proving your worth. So every person that's trained from an early age would be competing with every fiber of their being because they have to prove to not only themselves but also to their family since they don't have like a father figure in the house. And everyone around them feels the same way. So they're also trying like way harder. This is different from the Space Marines who only really start their training at the earliest, like 10 or 12 years of age, and they're only training to be a Space Marine to survive the augmentation process, and then they have to do years of training to deal with the chemicals, and then they actually start the assault training as a Space Marine. But by that point, they're usually like in their late 20s. Whereas by the time an elite is in their late 20s, they're like a master warrior, and that's even if they're like a minor. So they're just like me. Is that how you go through life? You get trained at an early age to be a super soldier? I didn't know that. Also, blade masters are just referred to as, I guess, master swordsmen. They can be, I don't know if you guys know this, but elites can be employed up to like 80, 60, even 80 years worth of age. Even as blade masters, they're still considered like... I like the Covenant still considers them battle assets. They don't like retire them until they're like over 100. So most elites that you'd be fighting are probably going to be somewhere in their 30s, 40s, maybe years older. So they'll have decades and decades worth of like fighting, training, combat experience. So even your blue elite miners are just seasoned vets. But the people who are 60s, 80s, they'll be like masters of the art. Sangheli are also given names as a privilege, and their names are actually supposed to be indicative of like what titles they earn. So if they have certain, I want to say certain pronouns or certain like suffixes or prefixes put on their name, that's indicative of their combat record or what they earn. So the better the name, the more skilled or more deadly you are as a fighter. I just brought this up because, like, whenever we talked about the Space Marines getting into melee combat with the elites, you have to prove they can beat the elites, and unfortunately, I couldn't prove that outside of like maybe Titus, because none of them have the experience to fight a warrior race that's trained from birth to be the best possible thing since sliced bread. It's not. Yes. Hey, man, like, why are you acting like you even disagree?
Look. The Space Marines had a really solid chance.
I'm sure. Something I didn't mention was that the Silent Shadow, aside from being like the hunter-killer team that's sent by the hierarchs, the prophets, to go take out their high-value targets, did you know that the Silent Shadow is actually used primarily to kill elite commanders? Were you aware of that?
I was not.
That was him. Yeah. So they send them there because they need not only someone skilled enough to do it, they usually need a blade master. So that kind of already cements the skill level of a Silent Shadow because they kind of need the best possible people to do it. In the novel where this is actually talked about, the guy in question, one of the shipmasters, is actually in disgrace for losing one of the luminary beacons, and they're going to send a Silent Shadow to take him out. He basically has to have a former Blade Master and all of his personal bodyguard around him at all times in order to not die to the Silent Shadow. And the Silent Shadow just waited him out. They literally just waited out until he fled into a specific system and just tracked him and followed him and they knew he was attempting to use them as bait to wipe out the Spartans, and they just ended up marooning him on the planet because they just didn't bother. They figured it wasn't worth the trouble, and it'd just be more satisfying that way, because that's also what the prophets ordered him to do. He thought he was going to get executed by them, but they could have killed him at any time, even though he was taking precautions to deal with them. Also, the Silent Shadow, once they're sicked on you, they will never stop coming after you. They're much like zealots in that regard, except they're significantly better trained. I believe there's also, well, actually, there are some statements in Silent Storm that the Silent Shadows at the beginning of the war, and actually during multiple points of the war, they go into the outer colonies and they actually they fluently learn the language of English and a couple other languages. They become like a multilingual, like a bilingual, like master of human ebonics. And apparently they do this for weeks and months at a time, and no one even knows they're in the outer colonies. So that means they're walking around as like a 7-foot tall, like, biped, cloaked in camo, where no one can see them, completely undetectable, learning all their languages and all their customs, and then they just leave whenever they want. That's got to be some of the most bullshit stealth tactics I think I've ever seen. Also, these were just statements for, like, the cryostasis thing. That cryostasis just halts your, what does it say? Yes, it halts your aging indefinitely, so humans and the Covenant can ultimately slow their aging and just keep fighting in space keep fighting in both in space and on various planets across the universe in over a very long period of time, because technology essentially allows them to curb their natural lifespan. This is the last one regarding needle rounds blowing up the SPI armor. Yeah, because I was trying to explain to Zim that needle rounds can actually penetrate Spartan 3 armor, and that if they're able to do so, they would have to get past the huge amount of force resistance that the SPI armor has. Because in one of the novels, Halo Retribution, Veda Lopez gets blown up into the air by a gelgenite pack that's been repurposed as a grenade, and the AI basically says that it's essentially much more powerful than a grenade, even though it didn't really do anything to her. And it's actually meant to blow up large boulders and completely, like, pulverize them. And it was a very powerful object. So for it to have that kind of force, and for it to be that force resistant, the SPI armor would basically be capable of tanking an explosion that could obliterate boulders, which is easily in the building level range. It's like a metric tons worth of force. That would mean that the needlers also have to be outputting more than that amount of force on their super combined explosions, and they have to be capable of penetrating armors that can resist that kind of force, such as the SPI armor. Because when they hit that one guy from Team Saber, I believe his name is Dante, he gets his entire rib cage blown out. The only reason he didn't die was because of his, like, some of his, like, chemical infusions that basically made his adrenaline run super high. He was clinically dead, effectively. So, I was just pointing that out, and this to show they super combined in 3 shots. Just to point out that technically, yeah, they could kill the Space Marines in a few shots. I was wondering. Oh, go ahead.
Oh no, I don't know if you saw Vader's comment right there, but I guess he's having trouble signing the Path of Exile too.
Yeah, he mentioned something about a lot of people watching the login, and he thought it was really funny. I had no idea what he's referring to, but I guess they're just waiting for the game to drop or something.
No. So when a game is really popular with servers, if you don't get in at the very start, so many people are signing in that you can't get into the game. Overwatch 2 had this problem when it first came out. It was so popular that there were streamers who would just stream trying to log into the game.
That's funny. Did Dante fill an elite's Dark Soul with light? No, he did not. He got his chest filled with light, actually. The worst kind. So this is a scan that was provided just from the Deathwatch Codex rulebook, so if anyone wanted to read that, I think there's PDFs for it anywhere. But essentially, this is just a description of how power weapons work. So I mentioned that the power weapons could actually work on things like the Wraiths, because the power weapons in 40k have a disruptive energy shield that just rends matter. So it can slice through projectiles. It is a form of Duraneg, so it can do what it needs to do to get the job done. And lo and behold, this is the Iron Halo, Zim. Now, as you can see, it is a pretty big shield, so it kind of covers a little of their flanks, but it obviously doesn't cover the backside. This is what it looks like.
I fucking hate you so much. It's not your fault, but I hate you nonetheless.
I know. I was like, oh man, like we're totally talking about the same thing, right? I hope he knows they're camping behind Calgar. For context, to anybody, when I mentioned that when Zim brought in Calgar because he realized they needed the chapter master in order to survive in the scenario, he was like, "Well, he has an Iron Halo, so they should be fine." I'm like, "Yeah, as long as they stay behind him." He didn't realize until later that the Iron Halo in 40k is a unidirectional energy shield that's projected in front of you. So technically someone can just flank you and shoot you from behind. They can also just pass through the energy shield. Like they can just physically pass through it. But, we don't talk about that. And then here, I think these are the last bits of scans. Yeah, okay, so this is just a couple shots of well, actually, no, I don't need to show how burnt the armor gets from standard plasma rounds. I'll go to the James 1. So the James, one of the Spartan 2s, basically gets his arm burnt off directly from a shot from a hunter round. This is in a Mark IV Mjolnir armor. Later, we see Kelly, Fred, and I believe John take a couple shots from fuel rods, two shots. They basically burn out their shields, flail their armor, or cause molten heat on their armor, and I believe Kelly is basically incapacitated and almost flatlines because she gets shot directly by 2 in the Mark V armor. And then there's another example in Halo 1 where Master Chief gets shot directly in the chest. So in the Silent Cartographer mission, when you go to find the hunters, Master Chief canonically gets blasted in the chest by a hunter round. And then he gets up afterwards. So he's mostly fine. I think the limit of the Mark V Mjolnir armor in terms of hunter rounds is 2. But they can survive a single one. Fred also gets shot by one and goes Savonic square in the chest, and it just kind of knocks him back, dissipates his shields. Oh, and then here's the scan that got broken that pissed me off earlier. So this is well, let me see if I can change. Is this close enough for you to where you can see it?
We can see it, but we can't read anything on it, so we can see it.
All right. Time to hold up. Give me a moment. Time to change windows. This will be like the last set of scans, I think. There we go. So this is during the events of Halo Uprisings comics at the end of Halo 2, after Master Chief has gotten the Mark VI Mjolnir armor and he's boarding Truth's ship. This is right before he comes down to Earth at the beginning of Halo 3. He rounds the corners, killing a bunch of enemies, and then he sees 6 hunters with fuel rods, and they all blast him directly in the chest. And he's completely fine, not melted, not burnt, no scars on his armor or anything. And then later on, the Brute stands on top of him, attempting to interrogate him. It's about something that they've been lied to. I don't remember exactly what it is, but he's trying to interrogate him, and then Master Chief throws a plasma grenade onto his nuts, which explodes point blank in front of Chief, and Chief is fine afterwards. So the difference between the Mark 6 and the Mark 5 is like upwards of 6+ fuel rod shots, and it still doesn't burn the armor. 2 shots can burn the armor and drop the shields for the Mark 5. 1 shot will just burn away limbs entirely. So each armor is many, many times more powerful than the previous one. Now let me just change that back though.
If I'm playing the game that I paid
What
for,
were you saying?
good job, Aviator. Continue.
He's like, finally. Yeah, so I think that's pretty much. Oh, wait. I didn't show you the ones about, remember how I mentioned that Space Marines can't survive, like, orbital reentry?
I believe
Hang
you
on.
mentioned it.
Yes. Oh, wait. It's not. Oh, there we go. Yeah, so basically, this is from, I believe, the Unremembered Empire. And this is Vulcan basically teleporting out of Conrad Kurz's prison using his hammer and then ending up in the atmosphere of Macragge. And he essentially just gets vaporized on orbital reentry. Now, he doesn't have his armor, to be fair, but he's still a Primarch, so his heat resistance would be greater than anything like a normal Space Marine would be capable of having, even with their armors, probably even Terminator armors. And he, for lack of a better term, got cooked. So badly so that he was basically completely vaporized, and they actually mentioned later on in the following novel, when Gilliman's being asked about it, it's like, how did he live? And it's like, he healed. It's like, that's impossible. He fell out of the sky. He was burned to a crisp. You don't heal from that. It's like, and yet he did. It's like, but you said he was a corpse. It's like, yes, he was, utterly. So the only reason Vulcan lived was because he's perpetual. Because that's just one of his abilities. That's one of his Primarch abilities. That's how it functionally works. So any Primarch technically would have been cooked alive by orbital reentry. That means that even the like certain missions, like Long Night of Solace, where you have to jump off the ship, you would just die if you were a Space Marine. In any context, you'd be completely annihilated by the orbital reentry. Because even Primarchs can't survive it. So there's no reason to assume that like a normal Space Marine can. Vulcan Lives. Yeah, it does come from Vulcan Lives. That's actually the novel where it happens. Then also, I was just mentioning here that elites have like unlimited active camouflage technically. So cloaking elites would have been a problem forever. And then also that you can't, like the whole active camouflage thing, shimmering is not actually a canon thing. That's actually only the UNSC's pore camo. Like the UNSC has pore camo. Their camo shimmers. Normal elite's camo doesn't unless you hit it with something. But moving around in it, even at full speed, does not cause it to shimmer. Because they actually have proper working camo. Oni developed a Walmart brand version of it that they used in one of the comics, and all the elites in the battlefield were able to tell where the Spartans were when they were using it because it constantly shimmered and it had other problems with it functionally. It kind of like, because the way that armor, the reason why active camouflage in Halo shimmers is because it's bending and refracting light. So if you have a poor version of that, you're basically going to be causing distortions in the area around you, and you're going to see sort of like a gray bubbly mass of reality. And you're going to think, oh, that obviously stands out. Elites have perfected this technology, so they don't cause any shimmers. And Warframe is such a smooth movement, not just a Primarch. He is the Primarch of the Salamanders, yes. Each Mangler is stronger than the previous sim. Interesting. Oh, and then I also have examples from the Rubicon Protocol of a Mark 7, a Spartan in Mark 7 Mjolnir armor basically being penetrated by a single energy shield strike. Now, this is the Spartan, I believe this is Spartan Stone, so this is when her armor is like a little bit worn down from a lack of maintenance, but technically she still had her energy shield, and he went straight through her, even with the most recent armor specs. So that pretty much means that, like, even significantly better armors with more durability than what the Space Marines had got penetrated by like one shot. So Horus did nothing wrong. Wow. I wasn't expecting that one. But yeah, I think that's pretty much it. How long have we been going for now?
An hour and 50 minutes.
Really?
Yes.
Yeah, I think that's pretty much everything. Maybe next time I'll try to. Oh, well, I should have done that. Maybe next time I'll try to produce a better, more entertaining stream, because you guys just kind of showed up here and there. You didn't talk. You didn't ask questions. I didn't get a single question aside from Ezio asking me about the World Eaters.
I mean, to be fair, you are providing scans directly, and you're also providing like the direct evidence. I feel like they kind of know if you have the receipts that you're probably just telling the truth and move on from there.
No, I mean, like, they didn't ask any questions for clarification. Like other things in relation to, because I would have answered anything. That's what I'm here for. How dare all of you have a lack of curiosity? Well, that's pretty much all I've got for you today. I do have another scan that I forgot to mention. Well, no, I mentioned it before and I sourced it directly, but I didn't show it. But I'll mention that later. That's fine. It's I think we're good for now. That's pretty much everything I wanted to show. That was all the scans that I had for that protagonist swap. So that was about, if we're considering the amount of title messages that I took, like all of those little sentences that I put below the scans, there were about 100 of those each, and then the individual scans were somewhere in the range of like 115, maybe more. That is the kind of research that I typically do for a protagonist swap. I just don't edit it all in a chat. I just memorize it all from memory, and then I repeat it for you. So if you ever wonder what's the process behind creating stuff for the protagonist swaps, this is typically what we do. At least what I do. I don't know about Zim. I can't speak for Zim.
But no, that by itself is fine.
Yes.
Are we gonna have separate scans then for the next one? Because we do have the protagonist swap too.
Yes, but the next one won't be nearly as long because I didn't make nearly as many claims, and I'm not going to repeat scans unless I provide like. I'm only going to provide scans for like specific claims I made. Those were all the specific ones. I made general ones. Most of the claims that I made were about like Spartan stuff, so I'll just go and get those. There should only be like 40 or 50, so like half as many as this time, maybe less. That'll be easy.
All right, sounds good. Then we'll go ahead and call it here. So, thank you guys for your time as always. Have a nice day. I'll see you guys on the next stream or video. Take care.